When I was a little kid, I was really good at just being me. But I grew distant from my true feelings. I was shaped by what society expected from me, holding on to my masculine traits because they were encouraged. I lost sight of my more sensitive qualities. I became disconnected from myself and then disconnected from others. I was taught to be in control of everything around me.
No, come over here. No, come this way.
And that girls were not my equal. That would have devastating effects on my life and those around me. I responded to stress with anger. I hid my emotions. I felt the need to dominate and control others.
No, listen to what I'm telling you. I know what I'm talking about.
All of which was bad for my health. I reject those rigid notions of manhood. I never use violence. I value women, girls, and non-binary people. I speak out against injustice. Healthy manhood makes me happier and healthier. Now I'm more in touch with my emotions. I just feel a whole lot better. I value and respect all people. Healthy manhood prevents problems in my community. I can be myself. I can express my version of masculinity. I can create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women and girls are valued and safe.
Hello, thank you so much, Roz, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to thank the Dallas Women's Foundation as well as Tony and bigBANG for this wonderful opportunity to share some moments with you all this morning. My name is Ted Bunch. As was mentioned, I'm the co-founder of A Call to Men. We're a not-for-profit organization that's been in existence since 2002. So we're about 18 years old, and our work has been around ending violence and discrimination against women and girls while promoting a healthy manhood. Our vision is to create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women and girls are valued and safe. And we really believe that if we're going to address the issue of domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, bullying, homophobia, all of those things, then we have to address it through men. That we're accustomed to dealing with things through intervention. Something happens and we want to do something about it. We want to intervene. Well, our work is to go upstream to prevention where it never happens in the first place. And that bridge from intervention to prevention is men. So before I really go much further into this, I want to make clear to everyone that we're going to have a conversation. I'll be sharing a bit about our work and our perspective and what we believe the solution is. And then I'm going to ask Roz to join me to have more of a dialogue. But I do want to say, first of all, that anything you hear after this point, it is not an indictment of manhood, but it's an invitation to men. I just want to say that again. This is not indicting men, it's inviting men to the conversation. Because really, we've been misinformed about a lot of things, and I'd like to just deconstruct that a little bit. So the work of A Call to Men, we are in from middle schools and high schools to colleges, to corporate America, to professional sports leagues, all of them, NFL, NBA, National Hockey League, Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, the military, law enforcement, really wherever there's men and boys is where we want to be. We go from grassroots organizations to Fortune 500 companies, talking about this issue around masculinity and manhood. So when we look at domestic violence or sexual assault or even sexual harassment in the workplace, most men don't do those things, right? While the overwhelming majority of violence against women is men's violence, most men are not violent, but we're silent about the violence that other men perpetrate. And that's as much of the problem as the violence is. And that's what we want to speak to really, is the silence. Why are we so quiet about these things? When we look at domestic violence or sexual assault, it's a small number of men compared to all of the men in the United States who do these things, right? Somewhere between 12, maybe 12, 15%. So 85, 87% of us are doing the right thing, doing the best we can and not harming people intentionally. But we have all this violence and discrimination that goes on against women and girls in our presence, right? So not necessarily right in front of me where I see a man hitting a woman, but it's the leading cause of injury to women, right? So we need to really look at it becoming the issue that men need to take on, because honestly, if women could have ended it on their own, they would have already. But they can't because men are the ones perpetrating it, right? So that's really what we need to grapple with as men. So let me just unpack our current state of manhood. So we have a concept called the man box, and it really talks about the collective socialization of men, our collective socialization, how we've been taught to be men. So those men who do those things that we don't want to happen, like domestic violence or sexual assault, and those of us who don't, really are taught the same thing. Our belief system is not so different. We don't go as far as they might go, but our belief system is cut from the same cloth, and I'll just inform you a little bit more about that if you don't mind. So when we look at masculinity and manhood and how we're taught to be men and how we pass that teaching down to our boys, there's a number of things that we're taught in this man box. We're taught that men are supposed to always be in control. We're taught that men are not supposed to ask for help. And we're not really supposed to offer help to other men, but so much, right? If I see a man in my life who's having a challenge and I ask him, how are you doing? Most men are gonna say what? I'm good, I'm fine, right? And then if I lean in a little bit more and say, well, buddy, you don't seem like you're that good, you know, he might look at me like, well, wait a minute, I said I was fine. You're not supposed to ask anything further than that, right? That's the man box, that we're not supposed to show any emotion except for anger, and that we're supposed to be dominant and controlling, right? And we're always supposed to know the answer. We're supposed to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We're not supposed to ask for help. Those are just some of the things. And there's some other things in the man box. And those are the three major things I want to talk about, is that we're all taught, and we pass this teaching down to our boys, and it's been passed down to us from the generation above us, that women and girls have less value than men and boys. Now, it doesn't mean you believe it, but you've been taught it. So I'll give you an example. Wherever you are, I'm in New York, many of you are in Texas, and I love Texas, by the way. We do quite a bit of work with the NFL, and the Texans and the Cowboys are both teams that I visit, and actually was recently on a Zoom with them talking about healthy manhood. So we're taught to have less value in women and girls. I'll give you a perfect example. It's football season. There's a dad or a coach or a big brother or an uncle teaching a young boy how to throw a football. Let's say he's 6 years old. And he's teaching him how to throw the football. He talks about putting his fingers on the laces and how to throw a spiral and put his shoulder behind it, all those things, but the kid's not throwing hard enough according to the coach or his dad or uncle. So the man, wonderful man, great guy, says to him, son, you have to throw harder than that. You throw like a... You all answered that question even though you may not believe it, I don't believe that. I think girls throw just fine. But that answer to the question is girls, and you know that it's girls, even if you don't believe it is, meaning that the messages you've been given about that situation tells you that that answer is girls. Well, where do we learn that from? That's our collective socialization. So we're teaching that boy what in that moment? He's 6 years old. Does he leave that interaction with that man he's looking up to, wanting approval from, wanting to learn from? Does he leave that interaction thinking girls are equal to him or less than him? Less than. How can he not? We're giving him these messages all the time. It's everywhere around us. And even though I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I'm still haven't reached the finish line, I'm still learning about my own collective socialization. You know, I remember I have 6 children. 3 are my biological children, and 3 came to us as teenagers. But my oldest biological son is 23 now. And when he was about 11, I stopped doing something that I would always do. Now, when I would leave on a business trip, I would say goodbye to my family, and Joshua, who's my oldest son, right? My oldest son, and he would walk me out to the car, pulling my laptop bag behind me, and I would lean down to him. Now, this is my oldest son. I'm a very proud father, and I'm leaning down to him. I'm going out of town now. At 11 years old, I'm saying to him, okay, son, now. I give him a kiss and a hug, and I say, okay, now you all can fill in the blank. You're the man of the house. Take care of things around here. You got it, son? I got it, Dad. He doesn't have anything. What does he have at 11 years old? If something happens, what's he gonna do? Run to his mama. But that's a wonderful father and son moment. And I probably did that 50 times before then. But in that moment, I realized, wait a minute. And mind you, folks, I'm going out to do anti-sexism, promoting healthy manhood training, and I'm doing these things. But it occurred to me in that moment that, wait a minute, the man of the house. So what am I really saying to him? What I'm saying to him, I'm undermining his mother. It occurred to me in that moment that the lesson I'm teaching him, which is a great lesson that we want our sons to learn, we want our children to learn, which is what? Be a protector, be responsible, be accountable, care for other people, care for your family. Those are wonderful lessons. And this is not an indictment on being a father, but it occurred to me in that moment that those lessons are being taught at the expense of his mom. In the same way that the lesson of throwing the football harder is being taught at the expense of the girls. And I'll just say that any man who's married to a woman on this call, I bet my next paycheck that whether you're there or not, she's got it, meaning your wife. And actually, when you're there, she makes sure you got it. So it's not that women aren't capable, they're actually extremely capable, right? But that's one way that we pass down the male privilege and entitlement that we have, that we've inherited, that is just given to us. We pass it down to the next generation in ways like that. So we're all taught that women and girls have less value than men and boys. And you see it everywhere. You see it in the pay gap with women and men doing the same jobs. You see it in a number of different ways. The other is that we're taught that women on some level are the property of men. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, wherever you are, if I'm in your community right now, and in 2020, with all we know about domestic violence and how wrong it is, if I see a man in your community right now hitting a woman, his wife or girlfriend, and I walk over to him and say, hey, knock it off. What does he say to me? Mind your business. So how do you know the answer to that? That's our collective socialization. We've all been taught that, right? She belongs to me. And most men do that in a responsible way as far as protect their family, provide for their family. Those are wonderful things, but women protect and provide as well. right? But we don't value what women bring. We value what men bring, right? So those are areas around how we've been taught, our collective socialization, less value and property. And the third is that women and girls are sexual objects, that we're taught that women are sexual objects. And if you recall, 3 years ago, when Me Too really became elevated as part of our national conversation, seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it? But it was only 3 years ago. And when that occurred, there were a lot of men on their heels, right? And we were on our heels because we knew, myself included, that, well, let me say this. I have not met a man, and we've been in front of a lot of men, who hasn't either done something or said something that has sexually objectified a woman, or has witnessed another man saying something or doing something and did nothing about it or said nothing about it. Now, that includes myself. Now, not in the last 25 years, but I want you to know how I behaved in college? No, I don't. I behaved like every other man in college. Every other young man in college, I should say, because that's what we think we're supposed to do, is objectify women. And I can say that I haven't met a man who hasn't either done something or said something or witnessed another man doing something, saying something, and did nothing about it, because I can say that with confidence, because one of the ways we prove that we are men is to objectify women. That's why the man at work who compliments her on how good she looks in her dress thinks he's giving her a compliment. She doesn't see that she's not taking that, doesn't land on her as a compliment. It lands on her as objectification. But we think we're supposed to do that that's the way we're supposed to interact with women. That's how we're supposed to be with women, is that they're sexual objects. So we're all taught those things. And the interesting thing about Me Too is that or sexual harassment in the workplace, is that we as men, one of the ways we focus on behaviors that men do that impact women is to blame women for what we do. For instance, if a woman's raped or sexually assaulted, we might say to her or to someone else, well, what was she wearing? How much did she have to drink? Why was she there? All of those things. That's got nothing to do with a man's behavior. And the same thing with sexual harassment in the workplace. What we're saying now, and these are well-meaning men now, we're saying now are things like, oh, well, I'm not going to have any meeting with a woman with my door closed. As if she's the problem, as if women were the problem when the doors were closed. No, when the doors were closed, actually men were the problem. But we blame women for the violence or sexual harassment that women perpetrate. Now, we can always find exceptions to the rules, but we're not talking about exceptions to the rules. We're talking about what the main problem is, right? Because I know that there's some men there saying, well, what about this situation? What about that situation? Well, we can find the exceptions, but let's focus on what really the problem is, right? So think about a young man in your community. I just want to show you how we pass these things down. Think about a young man in your community who's a high school senior, good kid, great kid. Let's say his name is John, and he's going to take a young woman who's also a senior in that high school. Her name is Kathy. He's taking her out to a movie, let's say, right? Once the movie theaters start opening back up, right? Let's say it's actually before COVID. So he's taking her out to the movie. He gets on a group text with some of his buddies, 3 of his male friends, and he says to them, hey guys, I'm taking Kathy to the movie. I'll hit you guys up later, right? He's on a group text, right? They'll give him a little bit of crap for that, but he takes her to the movie. Perfect gentleman, takes her home, comes back home, gets on his text again to his friends, and he says, hey guys, I'm back from the movie. Is the first thing those young men ask him is, how was the movie? No. So those questions that they ask him, where did they learn that from? Where are they getting these messages, right? Again, remember, those who do those things we don't want done is 12, 15%. So they're spending most of their time with good men, with us, with men who are doing the right thing, right? With men who aren't intentionally trying to harm women. But he still knew what to say and how to say it. We have a high school curriculum called Live Respect. It's Coaching Healthy, Respectful Manhood that we wrote with Scholastic. And we asked high school boys, including boys in Texas, actually, in a private school in Texas. We went to a number of schools all around the country, more than 500 young high school boys, and asked them a couple questions. We asked them one question in particular I want to share with you because it really speaks to how we pass this teaching down to our boys is, can you define consent? And by the way, we promote abstinence in this curriculum, but it's 2020 and our kids are experiencing sexual behavior. It's estimated that more than 80% of all fifth graders have already seen pornography because it's right there on their phones. You just type in whatever words, search words that bring that up, right? So it's a very different time than when we were younger, for those of you who are my generation or even the next. So with our youth, we asked them, can you define consent? And I'm talking about young men in your community and mine. So it wasn't one particular group. It had nothing to do with economics or class or race or religion. These were a wide sample. We asked them, can you define consent? And only 19% of our boys could define consent. 8 out of 10 boys couldn't. So that explains a number of things, folks. It explains sexual assault in the military. It explains sexual assault on college campuses. It explains why girls and women between 16 and 24 are at the highest risk for being sexually assaulted, because our boys think no means try harder or get her drunk. They don't know any difference because we don't teach them boundaries as they grow up. So when that little boy is on the playground and he hits he hits a girl or teases her, we'll say, oh, he just likes you. No, we need to confront it and teach him boundaries. That's the only way he learns, right? We also ask those same boys, if you were to have sex and she wants to stop, can she? 41% said no. So when does her body become her own? And these are good kids now. These are not kids who are grown up sexually assaulting people. These are our boys. They just don't know because of the messages they're getting from social media, TV, music, from the men in their lives who sexually objectify women even when they don't realize they are or not doing it intentionally. So these are the things we have to really address as men. So also, what we need to really discuss or unpack a little bit is how this man box, now the glue that keeps the man box together is homophobia, right? So the things we say to other men and boys say to other boys when they're outside of the man box are things like, don't be this, don't be a little girl, don't be gay, don't be this way, so forth and so on. And gay men are men and trans men are men, but in this man box, because it's a heterosexual construct, if you don't identify in that way, you're punished for that, right? You're shamed for that. So within our collective socialization, all of those things that we're talking about, right? These rigid notions of manhood, and there's wonderful things about being a man. I don't want to not be a man. I don't want to not be a father. There's wonderful things. So I want to lift that up, but I'm just talking about some of the problem areas. And when we talk about even our little boys not crying, when we tell them to stop crying at 4 years old, man up, suck it up, stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. They don't get to express their feelings, right? The funding source that was that wonderful donation that was given earlier, they talked about STEM, right? But we also have to talk about emotional learning, especially for our boys. And with emotional learning, they get to identify and share what they're feeling. But right now, our boys don't do that because when we tell them to stop crying, we're also telling them to stop feeling. See, when our girls cry, we pick them up, we reassure them, we pat them on the back, we hug them, we encourage them to let it out. We do that throughout their life. We don't tell them to stop crying. And do you know that women live about 6 years longer than men? That men literally are dying from stress-related illnesses because that emotional stress that doesn't get released, we continue to build that up till we get older, and we're dying 6 years earlier from these emotional illnesses, emotional-induced illnesses, heart attack, high blood pressure, all of these other things. And we also don't ask for help. So when we do start having issues, We don't go to the doctor as soon because we're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're not supposed to ask for help. I'm sure there's men right now on this call who know they're supposed to go get their physical and have it, or know they're supposed to go and deal with some ache or pain and have it. And I know that because when it comes up for me, I have to coach myself to say, no, Ted, you need to go, right? Because my socialization says, suck it up, it'll pass, you got other things to do. So men, as a result, die earlier. There's about 3.5 times higher rates of suicide among men than there are among women. Even male-identified youth, suicide is higher. Death by suicide is higher. And then when we look at the LGBTQ, transgender, nonconforming community, youth in particular, suicide is even higher because of all the shame and humiliation that comes from this gender-based violence and abuse that we're all taught. And also depression and anxiety goes undiagnosed. It's estimated that 6 million men in the US go undiagnosed with depression and anxiety, and COVID makes everything worse. It increased domestic violence by about 30% nationally and internationally, the sheltering in place. As you can imagine, those who are abusive don't get to get away, and they're spending more time at home, and those who are being abused don't get to get away. Right? Because I know that for me, even, I'm not an abusive man, but my stress level increased. I have a shorter fuse. I need to take time for myself, and I'm sure all of us do, right? So I'm healthy enough and have outlets that I don't harm other people, but I recognize that I may need to say to my family, you know what? I need about 2 hours away. I'll see y'all in a little bit. I'm gonna go for a walk, right? So it's just about taking care of ourselves. Okay, so I know I'm coming close to my time, so I just wanna wrap up here with a couple things. One is that this is not an indictment on manhood, it's an invitation to men that there's wonderful things about being a man. I don't want to not be a man. There's so much. But our liberation of men is directly tied to the liberation of women. See, we're missing out on a lot because of this man box, right? Because we can't be our full, authentic selves. And we need to be. And when I say our full, authentic selves, I'll give you an example. For the first 10 years of my marriage, I would probably bring flowers home almost on a weekly basis for my wife, and she would love the flowers. She would like the flowers. And her, all of her friends, her girlfriends would say, oh, what a nice man, you got a great husband, he brings flowers home for you all the time, right? But if I didn't bring flowers home, like she wasn't saying, where are my flowers? It occurred to me 10 years later that I'm bringing flowers home because I like flowers. But it took me 10 years to figure out that it's okay for me to like flowers. I don't have to do it under the umbrella of for my wife because flowers are for women. I'm doing it because I like flowers. I like the way they smell when I come in the house. I like to see the colors in the room, all of those things, right? So once I realized that, right, authentically, I like flowers. I'm now going to the florist and I'm picking out flowers in a much different way. I'm much more invested. I want this combination, not that combination. Don't put them in a vase. I'll arrange them when I get home because I want to arrange the flowers because you know what? I like flowers. So it took me a long time. And there's men out there who have a lot of other interests, but we've been told from the time we were boys not to pursue those interests because that's what girls do. There's a gender binary, and we want to get away from that and allow us to be our full, authentic selves. And we want our boys to be their full, authentic selves. So you may have a kid in your life who's expressing himself in ways that make you feel uncomfortable, right? And you're trying to, no, you don't want to ballet, you don't want to do that. Go play football. How about soccer, right? You're pushing him out of these things that he has an interest in. And what I'm saying is that allow him to be his full, authentic self as well. So before I turn it over to Roz, I just want to say a couple things about what healthy manhood is. Embracing a full range of emotion, being able to identify sadness, hurt, pain. It's not a sign of weakness. You're seeing it a lot now with professional athletes. Michael Phelps is doing a lot around mental health, which is wonderful to see. Right? LeBron James is on the Calm app. Kevin Love in basketball is also talking about mental health. These are wonderful things. There's men who other men look up to speaking out around these things. And that's what we need you all to do. Men using your platform and influence to help to promote a healthy manhood. We don't want to conform to always be in charge and to always be fearless. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not always have the answers. We want to value the life of women and those who don't conform to a binary, right? And their humanity. We also don't want to use language that denigrates women, girls, or anyone who does not conform to a gender binary. Look for friendships in women and not about sexual conquest, and model healthy, respectful manhood to other men and boys. So I'm at my time. I'm going to ask Roz to join me if she would. My wonderful friend Roz, who's doing such tremendous work. Thank you so much. And I also just want to mention that, you know, while the work is about, our work at A Call to Men is around working with men, that Roz has been a real leader and innovator in that work and in supporting the work of A Call to Men, recognizing that investing in A Call to Men and working with men and boys is an investment in women and girls. So thank you, Roz.
Oh, thank you, Ted. Love what you had to say. And we have a few minutes that have a couple of questions I'd love to have you respond to. And the first one is so many men, when they hear the term, you know, toxic masculinity, they like turn off. It's like, that's not me. No, I'm not that. I'm not that. And so how do you bring men forward to say, you know, come into this place with me and be safe?
Right. That's a great question. So when I hear toxic masculinity, I also cringe because masculinity is not toxic. And now it does speak to a certain behavior. So it gives us something to talk about, like people understand what toxic means, but masculinity is not toxic. Even when I was sharing and I said bad men, good men, I don't like that binary either, the good, bad binary. I almost wanted to take it back, that bad men, because what this does to us, right, even with the word toxic, it separates men. And what we want to do is say, no, it's all of us. We're all swimming in the same water, right? So if I say, who gets to define what toxic is, right? Toxic might be, oh, he raped that woman, but then I'm saying how great her buttocks looks when she walks by, you know, is that toxic, right? Like who gets to determine that? So there's different, so we're all swimming in the same water, and it's about the collective socialization of men, how we're all taught, how we've all been this has been passed down to us, and we pass it down to the next generation. Whether we want male privilege and entitlement or not, we have it. Right? In the same way with race, you know, the country's understanding, whether you want white privilege or not, you got it. So what do we do with it now? So I agree, toxic masculinity is not the term. It's really around the collective socialization of manhood and things, in our view, that are healthy and things that are not.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to this point of, you know, where we are in our world, in our country, and in the realization of the systemic racism that we built the country on, that we have to really look carefully at the intersections, and I know we are, of race and gender, and how critically those intersections matter. And so when you're asking men to observe the possibilities in this world of ours, what is possible in changing behaviors around racial equity and gender equity? What's possible in the world today that maybe wasn't possible before this was before we had to come to a reckoning?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So what I would say to that is that where we are now in 2020, we've all inherited this. Yeah. This is not an indictment on men, and it's not an indictment on white people. And it doesn't mean white folks have not worked hard, had difficult times, and had difficult struggles. It's just that those things have not come as a result of your skin color, right? So for me, as painful as it is sometimes for us all, because we're all being triggered in different ways, aren't we, Roz? We're all being triggered in different ways. So as difficult as this time is, I'm hoping it's also a purging and an awakening that we can all start to work together. Because one of the things that's important, I think, for our work and for me as a Black man, is that we have common ground with white men around this privilege thing and being man and masculinity, because it doesn't discriminate it doesn't separate. And with race, I think it's the same thing, that we just have to be at a place where we want to learn from each other, learn of our experiences and what we know, because most people just don't know. I mean, that's what's happening now, is that a lot of white people in particular are saying, wow, thought after the civil rights movement and all that, we were all good. And it's not, it's systemic. So that systemic knowledge is being exposed. So what I would encourage people to do is just just try to accept that maybe what we know or what we thought, there's a different perspective and a different reality to it. And that others have other perspectives on that, and to be open to that. And I also want to be open to, I really have compassion for what white people are experiencing right now too, right? Because I see the pain. I was on a call the other day, and there was a white man who just said, I just feel so terrible. And I was saying, well, I get that, but you're not at fault for it. You've inherited it. But now that we know,
what can we do?
What do we need to do about it? Right? Just like me with my son and the saying goodbye to him. Now that I know, I can't say these things anymore. I can't do that anymore. I need to move differently through the world. So I'm encouraging people not to beat yourselves up in any way, or not to feel guilty or anything like that, but just to say, you know what, I need to learn more. So I need to educate myself more, and I need to accept that maybe what's going on with other folks is real.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think I've been feeling the possibilities, Ted. That out of all of the horror of the killings and the things that have revealed the ugliness of our world and our society, I also feel like I have a heart full of hope that we may finally have a moment. We may finally have a moment that we can come to grips with these realities and make real change. And so I'm trying to live in a spirit of hope in that way. And I feel like we do have that opportunity. I want you to give everybody who's listening to us today some very practical advice. I love the way you promote the healthy manhood. And so let's play it out in a couple of scenarios. The first one is you do see a guy who's behaving in a mean-spirited, awful way to a woman in a public setting. And how do you handle that? What do you do? And, you earlier talked about the response that he has. This is none of your business, but tell me what you, Ted Bunch, would do in that setting that any of us could do, man or woman, but what would you do?
Great question, and a real practical one. So, and I've been in situations like this. Now, first of all, honestly, I would assess my own safety.
Yep.
Right? I would assess my own safety. And today in 2020, I wouldn't necessarily let that stop me, because I've been in a situation where I did not feel safe, and I still regret it. It was about 20 years ago. I'm in a diner in the morning. It was early in the morning. I was in San Diego getting ready to speak to some district attorneys. And there were two men who came in, big guys. And they were there with their girlfriends or something. And they were just big guys. Imagine just big biker guys, right? Because that's where they get on the bikes and everything. And I'm alone. It's about 6 in the morning. And the man sits down, he's stirring his coffee, and then it's a hot spoon, he presses it onto her hand. And I said, I'm looking around because I'm looking for, maybe I can grab another guy and we could just,
Right.
Right? But there's nobody, it's just me.
Right.
And I just said, am I going to make this better? Am I going to be able to do it? And I didn't do anything about it. And I regret that to this day. And this was about 20 years ago. I still regret it. I wish I would have said it. But I feel like if I would have said, hey man, that's not right. That's not cool. Do you know you're hurting her? Right. To not let those things interfere with me. So I know that I wouldn't do that, but for, someone who doesn't have the experience I have or been around this as much where, you've really kind of developed some muscles around it, I would say that you want to assess your safety, but I would encourage you to try to do something. So if it's verbally abusive, if it's physically abuse, let's say physical abuse, that you can say, even from a distance, hey, I'm calling the police, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, hey, knock it off. Or if there's other men there, you can say, hey man, this guy is being abusive. Will you just stand with me as I say something?
Yes.
You don't need to be face to face with them. You can have some distance from that. But to let them know that we don't do that anymore. And that's the same thing with sexual harassment in the workplace. Hey man, we don't do that anymore. Like, where have you been? So I really encourage us to try to do that, because that's what, unfortunately, these difficult things have to happen. And, I think about even with any kind of social change, from the civil rights movement to other things, there was people who stood up for things that were harmed, and I don't want that for anybody, but we do need to start doing that. But we can certainly say, hey, I'm going to call the police, or if we're at a movie theater, we can say to the manager, this person's being abusive.
This person's,
what can you do?
Yeah. Well, and I love that, because it is a question of, will you stand up? Will you simply stand up? And I think we're all being called to stand up now in many, many ways, and we must. Which is why you all say it's a call to men, but I mean, we're being called to stand up. I think the other scenario I wanted to ask you about was this. You see a little boy harassing a little girl, and it's playground harassment or whatever. You're the parent of a kid that's in the same class or whatever, but you just observe this. What do you do?
Yeah, so I would definitely, if I'm on the playground, so I would look for their parent, of course, but if their parent wasn't there, I would definitely look for some sort of authority if there was a teacher there or something like that. But if not, I think I would go down to the boy, I'd get on my knee and say, hey, we don't do that. We don't hit people. We don't push people. How would you feel if that happened to you? I would ask him, are your parents here first? And then if not, I would definitely have to educate him in that moment.
Yeah.
They would. And, if the parents had an issue with that, I would just share with them why. That's
it. No, I think that's good, because I think those are things that all of us, if you have kids or you're around kids, you witness things that you shouldn't probably just say, oh, that was a bummer, and walk away. That it's important, again, to stand up and to be. So I guess the last thing I'd like you to speak to is what are the two things that every man and woman who are listening to you today can say, I can go do that. I heard Ted Bunch speak, and I know I can do that to help create a world of healthy manhood.
Great. So I would say, first of all, really be our authentic selves, right? Really be your authentic self, because that frees you up in so many different ways. So that's one thing, right? But the other, and allow the boys and girls and those who don't necessarily identify in that way to do that as well, like to encourage that with our kids, right? Even if it makes us uncomfortable, to encourage it. Like, Okay, you want to take ballet? All right, let's look for a ballet school, right? As difficult as it might be, Dad, let's look for a ballet school. Because if he doesn't work it out there, he's going to work it out some other kind of way because it's in him, right? So that's, you know, and he may be my kid's a musical theater major now at Boston Conservatory of Berkeley because we said dance, because that's what he wanted to do. And then I would also say, for people who are different than you, if it's men, for women, if it's white folks, for Black people or people of color, if it's for Christians, as I am, then for maybe Muslim people, to read books, share, read books, do movies and things that are about other people, by other people, right? So that you get a better sense of culture, of appreciation for how so many things are similar among us, right? We don't have a lot of differences, really. There's so much similarity. We want the best for ourselves, for our children, for our communities. So really to educate ourselves with people who are about people who are different from us, so that we're not so afraid. One of the things that I've heard recently was, I forget who said it, but he said, you know, one of the most dangerous places for a Black man to be is in the imagination of white people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I was like, wow, that's true. And then he went on to say, because white people who know Black people are not afraid of them. It's all the things we've been taught about fear, bad, evil. I've been taught the same things, by the way, right? I've been taught the same things. That, wow, oh, there's a group of Black kids. Let me. Am I safe? I have to like say to myself, wait, that's my son and his kids walking and his friends walking down the street. But I've been taught the same thing. Right? That people who look like me are dangerous. That's why even with police, you have police officers that are not white who are being abusive to Black. You have Black police officers being abusive to Black because the culture is about Blacks being criminals. And less
the fear, and just that fear.
Yeah, that's
unbelievable. Wow, that's profound, Ted. That's totally profound. I hate to end this. It's so great to be with you. And everything that you stand for is so meaningful in our world, especially today. And I thank you for sharing with bigBANG. I thank you for spending time with me, and for everything that you offer and everything you give to this world, Ted. Thank you.
Back at you, Ross. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll pass the torch.
Thank you, Ted and Roslyn. Not an indictment, an invitation, and modeling a healthy manhood to other men and boys. Ted, that's very powerful. And Matthew Randazzo, and paraphrasing what you said in your open, that we need to have diverse voices in our boardrooms in order to have better outcomes. Very important. This theme was repeated with the corporate officers during the CSR panel. We have work to do. If you go to the websites of corporations and many philanthropic boards, we do not have enough diverse voices to move the needle on the outcomes we're discussing. Action. It is bigBANG DNA. We are pulling together actionable takeaways from this week so we can move toward the outcomes that our speakers and panelists have so passionately articulated. As bigBANG chair, I am humbled as a white man of privilege to be in a position where I can help bring these diverse voices to these necessary conversations and work toward and together to achieve the systemic change that we absolutely need, not only for our future, but for the centuries of oppression that women and people of color have suffered leading into this moment. Please take this 30 minutes to visit the marketplace and use the networking tab on the event platform. At 11 a.m., we have our next two breakout sessions co-produced with If Then and the Texas Women's Foundation with panelists from across the country. Changing the way the world sees women in STEM and systems change through centering the leadership of young women of color. Go to the schedule and click on the one you want to visit. Sit back and enjoy.